May become in the days ahead. Thank you for joining us here for a Friday evening edition of Weather Unfiltered. I'm Mike Bettis.
I'm Alex Wilson. Of course, our hurricane expert, Dr. Rick Knabb. You've been watching this throughout the week. We continue to follow the progress. Still on track to stay north of most of the islands and then make that turn to the north.
Yeah, now this is a difficult situation in this way. It's not an obvious direct threat to any land areas, but it is very capable of taking lives where the waves, the rip currents, the surf catch people in decent weather, but with really, really dangerous water conditions. That's where we have to really be careful.
You brought up past storms where the sensible weather is very nice and that lures people into the water, but what's happening in the water is the problem from the storm.
Yeah. And while we're doing that, we still have to not tune out because, as we've talked about the other day, Mike, sometimes these storms misbehave and we have to stay in tune over the weekend.
We've seen some surprises in the past. So, again, monitoring this one very closely for you. Areas they need to watch right now through the weekend, Alex.
All right, we look at some of the effects for some of the islands, northern Leeward Islands, Puerto Rico, also Hispaniola. You're taking a look at Puerto Rico right now. Things are going to get pretty churned up there in the ocean. We talked yesterday. This is an island known for having some really dangerous beaches with rip current issues, so we'll be watching for that here moving forward. Now, winds and gusts right now, not too much to speak for. We've got, winds generally around 5 to 10 miles an hour, if not calm, and no gusts at most areas. That'll be changing, though, as the system skirts to the north of the island. So we'll start to see the St. John's gusts 20 to 25 miles an hour. Same for San Juan. This is Sunday afternoon, so I think the start of your weekend is going to be calmer overall wind-wise and also ocean-wise. But keep in mind, 20 to 25 mile an hour winds, a little breezy to gusty. Shouldn't be anything that, really ruins your beach day. What would be the problem is, again, what's happening in the water with that surf really getting kicked up. Places in the Turks and Caicos, we'll start to see the winds pick up into the early part of next week as that storm makes that turn to the north and then continues up towards the in-between passage of Bermuda and the U.S. coastline. Here's a look at forecast wave height. So obviously the largest of waves going to stay closer to the center of the storm, but the blue, that's 10 to 15-foot waves. We could start to see those edge towards the northern beaches of Puerto Rico, also Hispaniola, and especially the Turks and Caicos. You could be looking at some big waves by Monday into Tuesday as well. And then look at some of those waves make it to the U.S. coastline. Parts of Florida could be looking at some big waves by Tuesday, and we'll watch the mid-Atlantic, northeast beaches moving beyond that. Those are the waves. Of course, there's the rip current danger, too. That's something you may not even be able to pick up. You're not noticing it per se, but you're going to listen to those lifeguards and expect that red flags may be flying at some of these beaches up and down the U.S. coastline into next week, Mike.
Alex, thank you for that. Now, taking a look at Atlantic Beach.
Yeah, so with all those opportunities for storms comes the very heavy rainfall that accompanies them. We've got 3 to 5 inches on tap between now and Tuesday for a good chunk of southern Minnesota. This would include Minneapolis and St. Paul. Some spots, though, south of the cities could see 5 to 8 inches of rain. So would not be shocked to see some 6-inch plus totals coming in from across that region. A lot of spots in Minnesota and Wisconsin, 1 to 3 inch totals coming your way. Now, Saturday, we're going to start off on the quiet side of Minneapolis. Saturday night, bringing some of the thunderstorms. Late Sunday night, more thunderstorms. So between tonight and then throughout the weekend opportunities, we've got some good rain chances coming. All right, Saturday morning, there's our first round of thunderstorms. But then, through the late morning, early afternoon, we've got a nice start to your weekend. So Saturday, I think afternoon hours, you're going to be able to get out there after the rocket and roll and start to the day that you'll have before more thunderstorms come in Sunday night. So tomorrow afternoon, you should be good to go for any outdoor plans you've got. Minneapolis, 3 to 5 plus inches. I think places like Minnetonka could edge just beyond the 5-inch mark. Again, farther to the south of the city, that's where we're going to see even some heftier totals. Rochester area, probably around 4 to 5 inches for you. This again between now and Tuesday of next week. So Rochester to Eau Claire, we've got the thunder. We welcome you back into Weather Unfiltered on this Friday. I'm Alex Wilson.
I'm Mike Bettis with our hurricane expert, Dr. Rick Knabb. We're talking Hurricane Erin tonight, which may eventually, over the weekend, become a major hurricane.
Yeah, that's the expectation.
I think it's likely to become a major hurricane. Big question is how strong. The Hurricane Center is now explicitly forecasting a solid Cat 4 at peak intensity. Of course, there could be a lot of ups and downs in intensity once it becomes a major hurricane. Could it peak out at Cat 5? Can't rule that out. But the other thing I'm really concerned about is once it peaks out at maybe a Cat 4, even if it weakens and goes through eyeball replacement cycles and then re-strengthens, it will be horizontally larger by the time it's somewhere between the East Coast and Bermuda.
And something else you're concerned about, and you've been saying throughout the show, you'll continue to say it, is that people will look at this and go, good, not a problem for me. I'm going to the beach. I don't have to worry about Aaron. Not the case.
No, especially given how powerful and large it will be. It is seriously going to churn up the Atlantic Ocean to dangerous levels. You know, we have so many examples, dozens of past hurricanes that have killed people on the East Coast of the U.S. even without direct wind impacts.
All right. Well, we, of course, have the first hurricane in the Atlantic this season. So we've allowed our viewers to ask the guy, ask your questions tonight about the storm.
Well, winds of tropical storm force are still within the realm of possibility in a place like eastern North Carolina, because we are just barely getting into the 5-day forecast window relative to Bermuda and North Carolina. And the wind speed probabilities, you might think, well, there is no shading on North Carolina. But once this gets closer, especially if it takes the middle or left-hand side of the cone, and if it gets horizontally larger than we think, Hurricane Center even mentioned in their discussion this afternoon, this might end up being larger than we think if it goes through these structural changes. So the chances of tropical storm force winds could go up for a place like North Carolina if it gets stronger and or larger and or farther left in the cone than if you were just to take the exact forecast right now. So wind could be a bit of an issue, but I think water is going to be the bigger issue.
Would a larger horicane have any effect on the rip current forecast?
Yeah, because you take everything considered equal and you make a hurricane horizontally larger, it pushes the ocean so much more effectively. And in remotely generated swells from an offshore hurricane, the rip current risk goes up the more swell energy you push toward the East Coast. So to answer your question directly, yes, it could make it worse in individual spots, and it could make it a bigger problem up and down the entire East Coast.
All right, great question, great answer. Continue to send those our way. We are, taking them via X. Well, right now we take you to Atlantic Beach. 9 people. So we look at the anniversary, and Dr. Knapp, talking to you about this, we look at Camille, we look at Katrina's landfall. So you really talk about the two in conjunction, both devastating to this part of the country.
Yeah, it's amazing how much Camille and Katrina have in common, but how many really critical differences there are. And the thing they have in common is they both formed, rapidly intensified, made landfall all in less than 5 days.
Yeah.
I mean, this was not a hurricane like Aaron, that was farther out to the east. This formed on our doorstep, and they both peaked out there over the Gulf. However, Camille actually made landfall as a Category 5 hurricane, but it was a relatively small hurricane horizontally compared to Katrina.
Right, so, Katrina had weakened, but at that point it had grown in size, so you were still dealing with, as we saw, a formidable storm.
Right, and so I think we thought we had the storm surge event on the Gulf Coast of record with Camille, but what we didn't completely learn from Camille is what a weaker but larger hurricane could do, and Katrina showed us that. And because Camille was small, it has been said many times that Camille didn't just kill the more than 250 people in 1969, that it actually killed some people in 2005 because they didn't think that the storm surge could be worse than Camille. And some people who survived Camille maybe didn't survive Katrina because they didn't think Katrina could do what it did, being horizontally larger.
And what else did we learn from Camille? Because you look at these two storms. Obviously, we didn't learn all lessons. There were differences enough. But, we look at these stories that Justin Michaels is doing about all the changes that have been made in the aftermath of Katrina. For Camille there, just before 1970, there were changes made then, too.
Yeah, we didn't learn after Camille that we could build against storm surge. We did that after Katrina.
All right, Dr. Knapp, thanks. Mike?